We live in a time where the accumulated knowledge of our entire species, thousands of years of mathematics, medicine, cosmology, ethics, is accessible within seconds. We carry supercomputers in our pockets that can simulate galaxies, decode genetic sequences, and connect us to anyone on the planet in real time. And yet, many people wake up feeling empty, anxious, adrift. Isn't it a strange paradox? Technologically speaking, we're advanced beyond the wildest dreams of our ancestors, but biologically and psychologically, we are still, in many ways, ancient creatures trying to navigate a modern world with Stone Age instincts. This irony isn't a flaw in the system, it's a feature of evolution. You see, natural selection rewards survival, not serenity. Our bodies evolve not for happiness, but for efficiency. Our brains are sculpted more for detecting threats than for contemplating meaning. And when we push that ancient hardware into the overstimulating environments of the 21st century algorithmic news feeds, artificial food, 24/7 noise, we shouldn't be surprised if something begins to glitch. What's holding us back in this modern world isn't war or famine or failed policy, at least not exclusively. It's the invisible frictions woven into our daily choices. The small habitual misalignments between how we live and how we're wired to live. Frictions not born of catastrophe, but of entropy. The slow, unnoticed unraveling of systems under constant strain. Systems like your nervous system, like your attention, like your social fabric. So perhaps the better question isn't what's wrong with the world, but rather, what are we doing day by day, meal by meal, interaction by interaction that quietly pulls us further from our potential as a species of self-aware stardust? Because that's what we are. Not metaphorically, literally, the carbon in your cells, the iron in your blood, the calcium in your bones, they were forged in the heart of stars. The very atoms that make up your brain once belonged to ancient supernovae that exploded long before Earth ever cooled into a crust. So when we talk about reaching for a higher way of living, we're not talking about mysticism. We're talking about chemistry, physics, biology, evolution, responsibility. This isn't about becoming more spiritual. It's about becoming more human in the most scientifically informed, cosmically grounded sense of the word. And that begins with asking, what are you allowing into your life that's quietly eroding the system you call you? Not because it's evil, but because it's incompatible with the organism you are. So let's examine together, rationally and humbly so, of the most common sources of friction in the human experience today. Frictions that have nothing to do with fate or mysticism and everything to do with neuroscience, planetary ecology, evolutionary mismatch, and the social behaviors we've inherited from a much older version of ourselves. Because while the Earth keeps spinning and the stars keep burning, you and I, conscious observers of the cosmos, shave the rarest of opportunities, not just to exist, but to adapt intentionally to become the authors of our own trajectory in a universe that otherwise moves by blind physical law. Let's begin. Let's start where civilization often begins and often forgets at the table. You are not just what you think. You are what your cells are made of. And those cells, astonishingly complex as they are, operate on the raw materials you provide: nutrients, electrolytes, amino acids, the building blocks of life. When you put something into your body, you're not merely satisfying hunger, you're issuing a biological instruction, a command. Now imagine giving that command in a language your cells never evolved to understand. That's what processed food is. In evolutionary terms, your digestive system is a finely tuned instrumenta system calibrated over millions of years of foraging, hunting, and consuming whole, recognizable organisms. Foods grown under the sun, pulled from soil, harvested from water. These contain the kinds of molecular patterns, nutrients, fiber structures, phytochemicals that your body recognizes and knows how to use. But today, the average person consumes food designed in a laboratory, stabilized with compounds whose names sound like entries in a chemistry textbook. sweetened beyond recognition by sugars refined to a level never encountered in nature, colored to be more appetizing, preserved to outlive the very people who eat them. Now, here's where science steps in, not to judge, but to observe. Studies in biochemistry and neurology have shown that ultra-processed foods disrupt the feedback mechanisms that regulate hunger and satisfaction. They spike insulin, confuse the gut-brain axis, inflame tissues, and contribute to metabolic conditions like obesity, type 2 diabetes, and even cognitive decline. In other words, the food isn't just unhealthy. It's confusing your physiology, like trying to use sand instead of electricity to power a telescope. And the irony is staggering. We can send probes past Neptune. We can photograph the afterglow of the Big Bang, but we still fuel the most advanced object in the known universe, the human brain, with materials barely worthy of the label fuel. It's like giving a Ferrari mud for gasoline. So when we talk about raising the human condition, not spiritually, but biologically, we must begin by restoring harmony between our evolutionary history and our modern environment. Because there's no version of human flourishing in which the body is inflamed, the brain is fogged, and the gut microbiome ecosystem within you is under siege. If you want to think clearly, feel deeply, and move purposefully in the world, then you must begin with what you ingest. Not because food is sacred, but because it is structural. It is data. It is the foundation upon which every other aspect of your consciousness is built. Even stars, in all their glory, require hydrogen to ignite. You, in all your potential, require better inputs. So eat like the conscious stardust that you are not like the distracted consumer someone else programmed you to be. Let's continue. We tend to think of water as a beverage, a commodity we consume when we're thirsty. But from a scientific perspective, water is not optional. It is fundamental. It is the medium of life. Roughly 60% of your body is water. Your brain, closer to 75%. And this isn't a trivial statistic. It's a profound clue about the kind of machinery you are, because water in your body doesn't just sit there. It moves, it conducts, it facilitates the transmission of electrical signals between neurons. It carries ions, charged particles across cell membranes. It participates in chemical reactions that generate energy. It stabilizes temperature, supports cellular structure, and serves as the stage upon which the entire play of biology unfolds. In a very real sense, you are not just a body with water in it. You are an electrical system suspended in liquid. Now, consider this. Every signal in your nervous system, every thought you think, every muscle you move depends on the movement of ions through water-based pathways. If you are dehydrated even slightly, those signals slow down. Your cognition dulls, your reflexes degrade, your ability to self-regulate emotionally and physiologically becomes impaired. And yet, in the age of caffeine, soft drinks, and hyper-palatable beverages engineered for taste instead of function, hydration is no longer intuitive. We consume diuretics that drain us, not replenish us. We replace what nature designed clean, mineral-rich water with chemical cocktails served in plastic vessels. Then wonder why anxiety spikes and sleep suffers. Let's zoom out. Imagine Earth without water. You don't have weather. You don't have rivers. You don't have life. Now imagine your body without water. You don't have clarity. You don't have energy. You don't have a stable platform for thought. We are, quite literally, small aquatic ecosystems orbiting a star. So when people speak of energy levels, they often forget the most literal interpretation. Without water, the energy transfer systems of your body, ATP production, neural firing, thermal regulation breakdown. It's not magic, it's chemistry. And once again, the irony emerges. We track our screen time, but not our water intake. We manage our calendars, but neglect the very molecule that makes time-based thought possible. So here's the shift in perspective. Don't drink water just to survive. Hydrate to optimize, to participate fully in the astonishing electrical symphony that is your conscious experience. Because when you give your body what it evolved to depend on, you restore not just function, but fidelity. the ability to tune into the present moment without distortion. And in a universe where clarity is rare and distraction is plentiful, hydration becomes an act of rebellion. Let's keep going. In the vast expanse of the cosmos, there are stars that burn for billions of years, black holes that warp time, and planets whose atmospheres are toxic to life. But here on Earth, there's a peculiar kind of toxicity we've invented ourselves, the kind we voluntarily ingest. Alcohol, nicotine, substances designed not by evolution, but by culture socially endorsed biochemical agents that temporarily shift perception, suppress inhibition, and in many cases, erode function. Let's look at them through the lens of science, not judgment. Take alcohol, a molecule simple in structure, but profound in effect. It crosses the blood-brain barrier rapidly. It slows neural transmission, impairs the frontal cortex, the very region responsible for executive decision-making, emotional regulation, and long-term planning. In essence, alcohol does not unlock your true self. It disconnects your higher self. It suppresses the mechanisms of introspection and reason that distinguish the human brain from every other known biological structure in the observable universe. And nicotine? A stimulant that targets the dopamine system. It mimics neurotransmitters, hijacks reward circuits, and creates dependence not through force but through familiarity. The same way a planet becomes locked into a gravitational orbit, the brain becomes locked into cycles of craving and temporary relief. Over time, what once felt like control becomes compulsion. The orbit tightens. Now, here's what's fascinating these substances. While offering short-term modulation of mood or alertness, do so by interrupting the very systems designed to maintain your long-term vitality. Imagine giving your spacecraft a boost by turning off the navigation system. That's intoxication. You go faster, perhaps, but in the wrong direction. Of course, in small doses, culturally integrated substances may not appear catastrophic, but in cumulative terms, neurologically, behaviorally, evolutionarily, they represent a misalignment between ancient biochemistry and modern convenience. And the broader point isn't just about molecules, it's about agency. As a conscious being one who can model consequences, imagine futures and reflect on inner states you possess the rarest trait in the universe, the ability to choose against your impulses, to say, I understand the mechanism, I feel the desire, and still I will opt for clarity. Because clarity, in a world engineered for distraction and sedation, is a revolutionary act. You are not a machine, but you are a system. And like any complex system, your behavior is the result of feedback loops, environmental inputs, and biochemical signaling. When those signals are chronically distorted, your capacity to thrive physically, mentally, socially begins to degrade. So this is not a moral appeal. It is a systems update. You cannot optimize a telescope while pouring syrup into its lenses. You cannot expect insight while short-circuiting the circuits designed to generate insight. The choice then is not about abstinence or indulgence. It's about coherence, integrity between the tools your biology evolved to use and the environments you place them in. Because in the end, the most powerful psychoactive substance you will ever encounter is not a drink, a smoke, or a pill. It's awareness. And the ability to direct eye undistorted may be the closest thing we have to free will in a universe governed by law. Shall we continue? Let's talk about space, not the kind between stars, but the space you inhabit every day. The human brain did not evolve in concrete rectangles or under flickering fluorescent bulbs. It evolved under sunlight, among trees, in open skies and irregular terrain. For over 99% of human history, we were wanderers on a dynamic, unpredictable earth exposed to shifting winds, birdsong, the scent of soil, the cooling rhythm of night. Then, in the last micro instant of evolutionary time, we built boxes. We tiled them with plastics. We filled them with screen. And we began to live not as organisms embedded in ecosystems, but as operators inside sterile containers of convenience. And here's what the science reveals. Your circadian rhythm, internal 24-hour clock that governs everything from sleep to hormone secretion, is exquisitely tuned to natural light. Blue wavelengths in the morning trigger alertness. Dim red light at dusk prepares the body for rest. This system evolved under the arc of the sun, not the harsh fluorescence of office lamps or the cold glare of LED screens at midnight. Disrupt that rhythm long enough, and you disrupt sleep. Disrupt sleep, and you alter metabolism. Alter metabolism, and you disrupt mood. Soon, what began as a lighting decision becomes a full system destabilization. That's not philosophy. That's neuroendocrinology. And it gets more interesting. The air you breathe indoors is often recirculated, filtered through ducts, conditioned by machines. In many cases, it lacks the microbial diversity and ionization of outdoor environments. Your body doesn't just crave oxygen, it responds to chemical cues in the air. Negative ions near waterfalls, terpenes released by pine trees, the microbial ballet of soil. These aren't romantic notions. They're measurable variables that affect cortisol levels, heart rate variability, and even immune response. Studies show that just 20 minutes in a forest can reduce stress hormones, that views of nature, even photograph scan, accelerate recovery from surgery. Why? Because nature isn't just beautiful, it's regulatory. You were designed to live in it, not merely visit it. So when we surround ourselves with synthetic materials, artificial scents, and digital overstimulation, we are, biologically speaking, placing a rainforest species inside a server room and wondering why it's restless, fatigued, and prone to burnout. We call this normal. But from a planetary perspective, it's an experiment in habitat mismatch. Imagine placing a coral reef organism in a fish tank with no current, no algae, no reef, just sterile water, and a plastic castle. It might survive, but it will not thrive. And over time, its systems will begin to deteriorate, not from trauma, but from absence. So ask yourself, what natural inputs have you substituted with synthetic ones? What parts of your environment are dampening your neural clarity, your immune stability, your emotional adaptability, not because they're toxic in the obvious sense, but because they are inert? You see, the human organism was never meant to be always on. Even the cosmos has rest states, black holes, cold nebulae, the quiet darkness between stars. There is intelligence in the pause. There is recalibration in silence. And sometimes the most scientific thing you can do is go outside. Feel the sun not through glass, but on your skin. Smell the earth not in a diffuser, but in a forest. Let your biology remember its origin, because evolution didn't build you for burnout. It built you for adaptation. But adaptation requires feedback, and most modern environments are feedback dead. To thrive again, we must re-enter the loop. Let's move forward. If you think of yourself as an isolated mind housed in a biological shell, you've missed the bigger picture, because biologically, behaviorally, and even neurologically, you are not complete without other humans. Social connection isn't an accessory to human life. It is a physiological requirement. MRI studies reveal that the same regions of the brain activated by physical pain are also activated by social exclusion. That's not poetic metaphor. That's cortical activity. In fact, loneliness has been linked to increased inflammation, impaired immune response, and a higher risk of early mortality comparable to smoking or obesity. From the level of molecules to the level of societies, humans are entangled systems. But like all systems, we are governed by forces. And one of those forces is social gravity. Some people, just by being in their presence, make you more focused, more reflective, more yourself. They stabilize your emotional orbit the way a large mass stabilizes the motion of a moon. They don't pull you into their center. They help you stay centered in yours. Others act more like emotional black holes. They absorb attention, energy, and time, but reflect little to no light. Conversations spiral, tension rises. You leave interactions feeling fragmented, not expanded. Now, let's not vilify. A black hole is not evil. It's just a gravitational anomaly with mass so dense that light itself cannot escape. But here's the key insight. You can choose your trajectory. You don't have to be captured by every field you pass through. Your attention, your presence is a finite resource. And where you invest it shapes not only your mood, but your neurobiology. Mirror neuron cells in your brain that simulate the actions and emotions of others make social contact not just interactive, but internalized. In other words, who you spend time with literally changes your brain, your emotional tone, your linguistic patterns, even your immune system markers. This isn't mysticism, this is embodied cognition, social neuroscience. And in an age of digital hyperconnectivity, we often mistake quantity for quality, follower counts for friendship, exposure for connection. But the nervous system knows the difference. It registers resonance. So ask yourself, are your relationships enhancing your coherence or creating static? Are you orbiting around mutual growth or around cycles of dependency, performance, and exhaustion? Because social dynamics like planetary systems follow patterns. Some spiral inward, draining energy. Others stabilize, expand, and sustain momentum over time. The key isn't to cut people out for being imperfect. That would be unrealistic and inhumane. The key is to tune your awareness like a radio telescope, sensitive to signal, but also alert to interference. Because just as a galaxy forms from gravitational agreement, your identity forms through relational resonance. You don't just reflect the people around you, you refract through them. So choose wisely, because in the cosmic choreography of human interaction, the orbits you maintain determine the clarity of your signal. Let's proceed. We live in a world where information is not just abundant, it is ubiquitous. We carry it in our pockets. We ingest it every waking moment. It flows through our phones, our screens, our devices at a pace that is so rapid, it's often difficult to distinguish signal from noise. Now, consider the brain, that magnificent bioelectric machine. It can process an incredible amount of data, but it's not designed to be bombarded continuously. The neural architecture of your brain evolved under far simpler, conditioned slower, more deliberate information exchange. A conversation around the campfire. A decision made based on sensory cues in the environment. Communication was intimate, proximate, and slow enough for reflection. Today, the modern world is a 24/7 data stream. Notifications, alerts, headlines, alerts about alerts. And the brain, it's not a passive receptor. It actively filters information. It organizes, processes, and sometimes ignores. But what happens when we overwhelm those filtering systems with noise? Neuroscience has a name for it. Cognitive overload. Your prefrontal cortex, the brain's command center for decision-making and self-control, begins to fatigue. The more information you process, the more it drains your capacity for deep thought, for focus, for coherence. It's like trying to use a supercomputer while it's constantly interrupted by random data points, so the machine never actually processes anything important. And the brain doesn't just feel overwhelmed, it reacts. Cortisol levels rise, heart rate increases, blood pressure spikes. Not because you're facing an immediate threat, but because your brain has been primed for constant alertness. You live in a world of hyperstimulation, and the result is that your body can no longer differentiate between an actual emergency and a flood of trivial data. This is the paradox of the modern age. We are more connected than ever, yet the more we consume, the more disconnected we become from our internal equilibrium. We are so aware of the digital landscape yet, so unaware of how it alters the very fabric of our mental and physical health. And here's the catch: your brain is plastic. It adapts, it rewires itself based on what you expose it to. This is neuroplasticity, the remarkable ability of the brain to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections. And that's good when you're learning a new skill or deepening a relationship. But it can be dangerous when you're constantly feeding your brain a diet of superficial, distracting, or emotionally draining content. Consider this: you are not just what you eat, you are what you watch, what you scroll through, what you listen to, and what you consume in the form of information shapes your neural landscape just as much as food shapes your body. Now, let's zoom out even further. If your attention is constantly pulled in 1,000 directions, your mind is like a radio tuned to static rather than clarity. And the most profound ideas, the deepest reflections, the greatest inspirations they require, quiet, space, stillness. The more you fill your day with distractions, the less room there is for your mind to drift toward new ideas, to find patterns, to integrate knowledge. Your brain is not a passive receptor. It is a dynamic system of connections and pathways, and it needs time to process. Without that time, without periods of disengagement, you risk losing the ability to think deeply, to innovate, to reflect. It's not just about turning off notifications. It's about reclaiming your agency, your ability to choose where to place your attention, to be selective, to ask yourself, what is worth my neural bandwidth today? So here's the challenge for this era: to learn how to tune the signal in a world of noise. Because the universe, as vast as it is, has its own rhythms, its own silence, and that silence is the most profound source of information. The stars didn't shout to be seen, they simply burned. The laws of physics don't need your constant attention, they simply work consistently through every atom and galaxy. So when you think about your consumption habits, ask, what am I tuning my brain to? What frequency am I broadcasting into the world? Remember, attention is a finite resource. Treat it like the precious currency it is, because your thoughts and the way you attend to the world shape not only your brain, but the very reality you experience. Now, shall we continue? As we continue through this exploration of the biological forces shaping us, let's pause to consider something often overlooked in the high-speed, high-tech world we inhabit: the emotional dynamics of human relationships. Human beings are, in essence, social creatures. Our brains are hardwired for connection, literally. Neurons fire in patterns that mimic the behaviors of others. We mirror the emotions, actions, and intentions of the people around us, creating neural pathways that facilitate bonding, communication, and empathy. And yet, as we move through life, especially in the modern age, much of our intimacy has become casual, transactional. We connect with others through fleeting moments, through texts, quick conversations, and surface-level interactions. We trade our attention for amusement, for distraction, for instant gratification, but often leave the deeper currents of emotional resonance uncharted. Let's take a deeper look. Emotional resonance isn't just a poetic term. It's a neurological process. When we engage deeply with others, mirror neurons in our brains align with theirs. We feel their joy, their pain, their sorrow, their excitement, not just abstractly, but physiologically. Their moods become ours, their energy, our energy. And this is not just emotional, it's biochemical. When you feel a connection with someone, when you really engage with their presence, your bodies are exchanging far more than words. You are exchanging biochemical signals. Stress hormones, neurotransmitters like oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin, these chemicals are released in response to the presence, touch, or even thought of another human being. And when these exchanges are mutually nourishing, you create a feedback loop of energy that reinforces the bond. But here's the twist. Not all emotional exchanges are nourishing. Some are depleting. Like a moon caught in the gravity of a black hole, some relationships pull us in without ever letting us orbit freely. These are the emotional black holes that drain us. They suck our energy, distort our perceptions, and leave us in an ever-tightening orbit that spirals us toward exhaustion, not elevation. From a systems perspective, the relationships we form, whether they're intimate, professional, or social function, like gravitational fields, some fields expand, pulling us toward growth, connection, and clarity. Others collapse, drawing us into emotional stagnation, conflict, and fragmentation. And here's where choice enters. Just like a spaceship can break free of the gravitational pull of a dying star, you too can choose which relationships you allow to define your emotional field. The patterns are not fixed. You have agency. The question is, what do you allow yourself to be orbiting? Are you surrounding yourself with people who elevate you, challenge you, and inspire you to expand your thinking and your heart? Or are you caught in the orbit of relationships that trap you in negative cycles, draining your energy without offering anything in return? It's not about labeling people as toxic or good or bad. It's about biological resonance. Do your relationships support the harmonious rhythm of your biological system, or do they create discord? In the universe, when two waves collide, sound waves, light waves, or gravitational waves, there are two possibilities. The waves can cancel each other out, or they can amplify each other, creating a stronger signal than either could produce on its own. Relationships work the same way. The strongest connections are those where both individuals amplify each other's energy, creativity, and emotional resilience. These are the relationships where mutual respect, understanding, and genuine empathy lead to greater coherence between both people. So, if you want to improve the resonance in your own life, it begins with your relationships. And that doesn't just mean avoiding toxic people. It means cultivating connections that amplify your energy, that challenge your thinking, spark your curiosity, and encourage your growth. Because relationships, when in harmony, aren't just nice, they're biological accelerators. They enhance your potential, elevate your mental clarity, and increase your emotional capacity. And you, as an individual in the grand cosmic system, benefit from this resonance, not just emotionally, but physiologically. So, take a moment to reflect. What is the energetic exchange happening in your relationships? What frequencies are you attuned to? Are you orbiting people who uplift you? Or are you stuck in cycles of emotional gravity that only serve to drain you? The universe doesn't discriminate, doesn't favor one star over another. But you, as an individual conscious being, can choose your own alignment. Let's move on. In the modern world, we are bombarded by a never-ending stream of information. It's an ocean of headlines, videos, posts, ads, notifications constantly pulling at our attention. It's not just noise, it's a flood of signals. The question is not whether information exists, it's how we engage with it, and more importantly, how it engages with us. Let's pause for a moment and think about the neurological mechanisms at play. The brain is an extraordinary organ. Its complexity is unmatched in the known universe. Yet, this highly advanced biological system operates on ancient wiring. Our attention circuits were built for a different kind of world, one where immediate survival was the primary concern. We were designed to detect threats, find food, and navigate social dynamics within a small group of people. In today's digital age, however, our attention is not just drawn to food or danger, it is captured by information mostly designed to be consumed quickly. Every ping from your phone, every notification, every comment, they all hijack your brain's reward systems, flooding it with dopamine, the chemical associated with pleasure, motivation, and learning. But here's the catch. This system was never designed to handle a constant stream of stimuli. The brain's dopamine-driven reward system wasn't evolved for scrolling through endless feeds. It was evolved to reward us for completing tasks that were necessary for survival, like finding food, building shelter, and forming relationships. Yet now, we get rewarded for every click, every swipe, every new post, leading to a cycle of dopamine-driven addiction. The result? Your brain becomes rewired. Research in neuroplasticity shows that the more often you engage in a behavior, the stronger the neural pathways associated with it become. Over time, your brain adjusts to this constant state of engagement, this cognitive hyperactivity, and it starts to crave it. Your attention span narrows. Your capacity for deep, uninterrupted thought diminishes. You might wonder, is this really that harmful? Well, let's take a look at the science. Chronic digital consumption has been shown to increase levels of stress hormones, like cortisol. It can lead to sleep disruption, which affects everything from memory to emotional regulation to immune function. And more importantly, it impacts the prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain responsible for decision-making, impulse control, and long-term planning. In simpler terms, your ability to focus, reflect, and think critically is being actively degraded by the very technologies designed to connect us. Now, this isn't to say that technology itself is inherently bad. The internet, smartphones, and social media have revolutionized human society in extraordinary ways. But the challenge is not technology. It's how we use it, how we let it shape our habits, how we let it dictate our attention, and ultimately, our reality. Here's the key point. You are not a passive participant in this system. You are the navigator. You can choose where to direct your focus. You can train your brain, just like an athlete trains their muscles, to resist the temptations of constant distraction. You can decide to engage with information intentionally mindfully rather than let it hijack your cognitive systems. The question is not whether information will continue to flood, and it will. The question is, how will you respond? Will you be the observer or the reactor? Will you let the noise define you, or will you choose clarity? Because clarity is not something the universe just gives you, it's something you actively cultivate. The cosmic irony here is this. In a universe governed by the laws of physics, where time flows in one direction, and entropy is always increasing, we have created an environment that actively works against our ability to think deeply, to reflect, to be still. But here's the good news. You don't need to control the entire universe to regain clarity. You just need to control your input, your focus, your attention. The most precious resource you have in this age of digital overload is not knowledge, it is the ability to filter it, to pause, to choose. And in that pause, you reclaim agency. Now, let's continue. We started this journey by recognizing the incredible potential of human beings. You are, after all, stardust, a rare configuration of matter that has evolved to understand the cosmos. Your body, your mind, your consciousness, they are the product of billions of years of cosmic evolution. And within that vast timeline, you are a fleeting moment, a blink. Yet, within that moment, you hold the power to influence not just your own life, but the trajectory of the species. And therein lies the great responsibility. The universe doesn't dictate your fate. It sets the stage, and then it leaves you, the conscious agento, decide how you engage with it. You have the power to tune your frequency, to adapt, to evolve, to choose the direction you wish to move in. The Earth is not just a ball of rock and water. It is a dynamic system, constantly in motion, a living organism in the universe. And like the Earth, you too are evolving, not just biologically, but mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. As our species accelerates into a new age, one where technology and culture collide with new understanding of the cosmos, we must ask ourselves, what version of humanity will we choose to be? We've discussed the environmental mismatches, the food we eat, the media we consume, the relationships we form, and how each of these shapes our physical and mental well-being. But now, the most important question remains, how will you evolve? Will you continue to orbit the old patterns, the outdated habits, the toxic environments, the emotional gravity that holds you back? Or will you break free, recalibrate, and align with a higher frequency? Will you become a conscious participant in the next phase of human evolution? Because evolution doesn't happen by accident. It happens by choice. So choose to rise. Choose to reconnect with nature, with others, with yourself. Choose to be a force of clarity, of coherence, of consciousness. The universe will continue to expand. The earth will continue to spin, and the stars will continue to burn. But whether you evolve with them, that is up to you.